Okay, Keith here. Just want to make sure my sound is good here. Let me check to make sure I can. Damn mic is working. I think it is. It's a pretty good mic. Costs more than drugs, you know. So I wanted to clarify some stuff with the video that I made the other day. And the easiest thing to do is instead of making a video that I gotta edit and stuff, I figured I'd just kind of talk through it. And you know, if you happen to be watching live, that's great. I don't have a lot of subscribers, but you know, hopefully it'll grow, and I'll answer some questions about some of the stuff I was talking about. So I was talking about chords in G. So as I was mentioning, you know, G has one sharp, F sharp, and you make the scale by adding that sharp into making an F sharp. So it sets up the relationship whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and then a half step finishes out the scale. And of course, that makes you need an F sharp to finish that relationship, and then that makes the major scale sound, right? And then I went a little step further, and what I was trying to explain was you build chords on each one of those notes. And the way you build chords is you stack thirds on top of each other of the notes that are diatonic to the scale. So if I start on G, I skip a note, which is A is the second degree, and then B, so that's the third of the chord, and then two notes above that is D. So the notes in a G chord are G, B, and D. Okay, and then of course on a guitar voicing we double it, but here you have a G, B, D. You know, anywhere you play those notes, you're going to get a G chord, right? Okay. Now you do the same procedure on A. So A, you got A, skip a note B, up to C. So you have A, C, skip a note D, and then E. So you have A, C, and E. And if you're familiar with the staff, it's just all spaces, right? It's going to be an A, and then a C, and then an E. The only note that's sharp or flat in the key of G is F sharp. So they're all just natural notes, A, C, and E, and that makes an A minor chord. So the nice thing about this is you can use chord or key signatures to spell chords. Okay, so in every major key, the 1 is always major, the 2 is always minor, so on and so forth. 3 is always minor. So you just start with B, then you go to D, you skip to C, then you go to D, and then you go to F sharp. So B, D, and F sharp, that makes your B minor. On C, you got C, C, skip the D, it's an E, and it's a G, and that gives you a C chord. So I was going through all that, and of course in a major chord, the first interval is a major third, which is 4 half steps, right? And then 3 half steps. Okay, and that gives you a C chord. So you learn all the diatonic open string chords and 5th string root chords, C, D, E, and then you can learn F sharp diminished. And you know, you can play it there or here. And then I was talking about a lot of times folks will just substitute the 5 chord with the 3rd in the bass for the 7 chord. So you hear that substitution. There's the diminished, and here's the 5 chord with the 7th in the bass. Now it's really the same chord because the 7 chord is F sharp, A, and C. Okay. What we did is just added the root in there, which is D, which is the root of the 5 chord. So kind of pretty much interchangeable. But if you play a D7, you get all those notes, and you also get the diminished triad within the D7th chord. Like here, A, C, and F sharp. That's pretty much F sharp, A, and C. Just depends on what order. So anyway, a lot of times they'll use a D over F sharp, which, as I mentioned, kind of has a little bit of a sweeter sound, so to speak. So you want to learn all those chords: A, B, D, E, D7 with an F sharp or D with an F sharp in the bass, and then back to G, or for the purists, it's D diminished or F sharp diminished. Okay, so those are the diatonic chords in G. And then what I went on to say was, now when you're starting, there's real common chord progressions. This is one. So it's G, walks down to E minor, up to C, and up to D. Right? So you can kind of get used to hearing that. And there's all sorts of them. Okay. And I add a little color to it. You can kind of add the D, the add 9 for the 4 chord. I like the G on top, gives it kind of a nice twang. And then the D, you can kind of do the suspended. Right, that sort of thing. You can kind of walk up to the bass notes. You can kind of figure all the different variations of it. There's your C. You can play the C up here. So those are the diatonic chords in G. In other words, they're all made from scale tones. Then I told you about F. What is that? And I said that that's a borrowed chord. And what's a borrowed chord? Well, it's borrowed from the parallel minor. So if I'm in G and I build a scale, a G minor, which is the same as the key of B flat major, but so it has 2 flats in it, G minor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the 7th degree of a G minor scale is F. And if I build notes on the G natural minor, I'm going to get an F, A, and a C. And you hear that a lot in G. You hear it's called a flat 7 chord. So now the trick to it is, it's the harmonic rhythm of the chord. In other words, if I just start on F, it's not going to sound like I'm in G, right? But if I start on G, it sounds like it should go back to G. And you can kind of almost hint at that minor flavor it has to it when you go to that flat 7. Even their 2 major chords, you still get a little bit of that minor flair to it. So that's a flat 7/7 chord. Gordon Lightfoot used that quite a bit on his big hit, "If You Could Read My Mind, Love." Which brings me to the next chord, which is the secondary dominants. Which I wanted to kind of get into. I did mention the 4 major and 4 minor. If you're in G, you have a G, and then you go to C. Then a lot of times you'll hear a C minor, and it progresses very naturally back to the G chord. So, that some people call it subdominant minor. It's just a matter of terminology. It's a matter of what you like calling it. But anyway, no, it's just a borrowed chord from G minor. And it sounds very natural going back to G. So those are some barred chords, and we'll do some other ones. But one of the things before we get to more barred chords is secondary dominants. So the first thing you got to understand is, what is the primary dominant? Well, in G, the primary dominant chord is D7 or D over C, which we talked about, or D9. Any dominant chord where the root is the D, is the 5, is the 5th degree of the G scale. That's called the primary dominant, or just the dominant chord in the key. So D7 is the D, or D7 is the dominant chord in G, which kind of pulls real nice back to the root, back to the tonic. And the reason is it has the 7th pull. Okay. And some people call it tritone, like, okay. It does, it pulls real nice. So it sets up that, up. So that's 5 to 1. Well, you can do that with every diatonic chord. So if we're in A minor, what would the secondary dominant for that be? Well, it's a dominant chord that's a 5th up from it. So if we're on A, so that would be E7. So that would be G, E7, which is 5/7 of 6, E7, or 2, I'm sorry, 5/7 of 2, then 2, then 5, then 1. So G, so E7 is the secondary dominant of A minor. Okay, so you can do secondary dominants. You may hear that, or you may hear just diatonic E minor. But if you go to E7 and it goes to A minor, it's probably a secondary dominant. So that's the secondary dominant of 2. What's the secondary dominant of B? Well, F sharp. You can hear how it kind of went nicely to that. So you have G, to F sharp 7, to B minor, to C, 4. So secondary dominant of B minor, which is the 3 chord in the key of G, is F sharp 7. G, F sharp 7 to B minor 7. Then you could go to the secondary dominant of 2. Then you could go to 2. Then you could go to 5. And you could go to 1. So again, you got 1, 5/7 of 3, 3, 5/7 of 2, 2, 5, 1. Okay. If we have C, what is that? Well, that's the 4 chord. What would be 5/7 of that? Well, G is 5 notes above it. So if we make this a G7, you've heard that quite a bit. To 4 minor. You kind of hear how they each other. So it's the 1 chord, you make it a dominant, and it always goes to the 4. It leads nice to the 4, then a lot of times you'll hear it go to 4 minor and back to 1. Okay. The 5 chord is D7. Can you have a secondary dominant of a dominant? Well, yeah, sure you can. It's A7. So that has a real nice pull to it. So this is 1, this is 5, 7 of 5, this is 5, and this is 1. Can you have 5, 7 of 6? Sure. E minor, 5, 7 of 6 is B7. 1. 4. Can you hear how it pulls to it? 1, 5, 7 of 6, 6, 4, 1. Okay. You can have 5, 7 of 7, which is, so you can have G, which would be F sharp 7, F sharp diminished 7. You could have a C sharp 7, which doesn't really, it's kind of rare. C sharp 7. Usually it'll go to another dominant chord. Like if you go G to C sharp 7, to F sharp 7, to B7, to E minor 7, to A minors. Yeah. So, usually it's some sort of altered chord. When you go to the 7, something based on 7, and you're putting a secondary dominant in front of it. It might be like F minor, and then they'll bring it back inside. Anyway, not real common. I guess kind of was a very good example. So if you have G and you go to like F, C sharp 7, it'll usually go to F minor. Okay, then to B7, then to 6, 5, 7 of 2, then to 2, then to 5, then to 1. So those are the secondary dominant chords. Like I said, 7 doesn't work too good. And I did the most examples of that. But anyway, just remember it's the dominant chord that's 5 notes above the one you just played. And so again, if we're in G, the secondary dominant of A minor is E7. It leaves nice to it. The secondary dominant of B minor is F sharp 7. The secondary dominant of C is G7. The secondary dominant of D, which is the 5, is A7. That's called 5, 7 of 5 then. That's probably one of the nicest ones. The secondary dominant of 6 is B7. Okay. C7. So what would that be a secondary dominant? Well, that would be the secondary dominant of flat 7, 7. Okay, which kind of hits you as a key change. But you can have secondary dominants of borrowed chords too. But anyway, in this place, if you hear a C7, that's probably it's going to sound like it's going to go to a different key. Probably. Yeah, I would think so. So anyway, the primary ones are the 5, 7 of 2, 5, 7 of 3, 5, 7 of 4, 5, 7 of 5, and 5, 7 of 6. The rest are kind of just, kind of theoretical. You really won't hear them. Like 5, 7 of 7, you're not going to hear too much, especially if it goes to an F sharp diminished. So anyway, those are secondary dominant chords. So I hope that clarifies it. We'll do some more borrowed chords and stuff then as time progresses. So I hope that clarified the diatonic chords in G. Thanks a lot.